My name's Ricky Simpson. I'm the Product Marketing Manager for Microsoft Defender for Identity. I'm joined today by Daniel Naim, and we're going to go through some of the latest detection capabilities that are present in Microsoft Defender for Identity with a little bit of a technical deep dive in the latter half of the webinar. So just some very quick housekeeping. There's a Q&A functionality, so you can ask any questions, and Daniel and I will do our best to get to those questions as and when the webinar is ongoing. If there's no time to answer your particular question, or if you want to go in a little bit more detail, you can jump to aka.ms/MDI community, and you can post your question there. That forum is very well moderated and very well looked after, so please do jump on there regardless. This webinar is being recorded, and we'll post all of the recordings to aka.ms/security webinars. And please give us your feedback for this webinar or any of our other ones at aka.ms/security community webinar feedback. And all of the links for these sites are in the Q&A screen as well. And please do join our security community at aka.ms/security community that covers all of our security products across M365 and Azure. So without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to our speaker today, Daniel Naim, and he's going to take us through the latest detection capabilities that we have in Defender for Identity. So Daniel, I'll hand it over to you. Thank you.
Hey, Ricky, thank you very much for the introduction. It's a great pleasure to be here again. This is the third or the fourth webinar that we're doing for Microsoft Defender for Identity, and I hope you enjoy those. Thanks for everyone for being here today. In today's session, as Ricky mentioned, we are going to talk a little bit about the detections that Microsoft Defender for Identity is doing. We're going to do a little bit of demonstrations as well. And let's get it started. Ricky, can you accept my request, please? Thank you. Yeah, it seems like I cannot control the slides anymore for some reason. Let's reshare the screen. I'll do it, if I may. Okay. Hold on. Sorry for the bit technical issues. Happens. All right. So, as I mentioned, in this webinar, we're going to talk about Microsoft Defender for Identity detections and its capabilities. We hope that you are already familiar with Microsoft Defender for Identity, as it's going to be a little bit of a deep dive. But if you're not, I'll just give a 30 seconds overview of what Microsoft Defender for Identity is, just so we can be on the same page. Basically, what we detect is we protect the Active Directory from the identity aspects of it. So domain controllers that contains Active Directory and ADFS are our primary security targets. And with that, we are the exclusive product from Microsoft Defender that protects the identity and the users in it. And the reason that we are focusing in Active Directory is because it is still a primary target for attackers and attack surface that we've seen a lot in the wild that targets that. And although Microsoft recommends you to move to Azure Active Directory and to the modern workspace and the modern security world, there is still usage for Active Directory, both from infrastructure perspective and the hybrid world, but also from the attacker perspective. And as long as it's going to be here and used, Microsoft strive to protect it and defend it as much as possible. You can see some of the headlines just really briefly about attacks in the last year that have been targeting the Active Directory. You'll see some of the names that you'll be, or CVEs that you'll be familiar with, whether it's the Solorigate, which was a huge campaign in the end of last year, breach that involved a lot of the ADFS and the domain controller as part of the kill chain, the attack kill chain. The Zero Logon was that was a little bit before that. Some other vulnerabilities, whether in the Exchange server that or DNS server that allows you to take control of the Active Directory. Bronzebeat, which is a vulnerability with Kerberos. Obviously, there are more traditional attacks like golden tickets or NTLM relay attacks. All of them are targeting the Active Directory and the on-premise identities. And attackers understand that the return of investments for those assets is very, very productive. And this is why we keep on seeing different type of tools that are consistently updating with latest techniques like Bloodhound to create lateral movement in your organization, the ability to do Kerberoasting in order to get leverages credentials, the ability to find SPNs for Kerberoasting or for different type of techniques, resource-based constraint delegation. Everything is related to the fact that attackers are trying to get control of the crown jewels of the environment, which once compromised, it's probably a game over. And the attacker can do whatever he wants, because once you control the Active Directory, you can get your persistence, you can get domain admins, and you can do whatever you want. And the most recent ones, which we're gonna take a little bit more of a drill down today, was the Print Nightmare and Petite Potam, the summer latest, as we call them internally. Every summer or every it depends on the season, but we've seen a different type of new capabilities, and those are the two new ones that were released around July and August. That allows you to take control on devices with little to no effort, and we're going to show that in our demo today. Obviously, those attacks are not primarily targeted around Active Directory, but once executed correctly, an Active Directory is a source for manipulation that should be detected.
So there you go. Sorry, Daniel. I was just about to say, could you put that slideshow mode? But you've completely preempted me asking that, so I appreciate that. It's all full screen now.
Yep. Pardon. And again, as I mentioned, the Active Directory is the single source of truth when it comes to identities, and it will be attack surface for years to come. And as long as it's being used, we will be there to defend it. Some of the little hype and the things that we've seen with our customers and users and the community, you can see, you can read it about it when we talk. While I talk, you can make sure that we read all of the tweets and whatever you think about the product. This is really helps us to improve. This is a good opportunity for us to see what's your how do you use the product and how you can leverage Microsoft Defender for Identity with recent threats. This is a line that I really like, that red teams hate it. If you made a note for our link to the tech community, you can see you can read our latest blog about what is Microsoft Defender for Identity from the eye of a red teamer, which is a great reading, and we had the pleasure of hosting a red teamer in our tech community. So what are we going to talk about today? We're going to take a little bit of a deep dive of how Petite, Potam, and Print Nightmare works. We're going to demo Print Nightmare, and we're going to talk a little bit about how we create an alert in MDI. We'll demo them, and then we'll do a quick summary. Again, as I mentioned, you have to have some sort of familiarity with Microsoft Defender for Identity for this session, but don't worry if you're not. We're gonna do it step by step. So even if you're not familiar with the UI or the details, you'll still be able to understand the added value of Microsoft Defender for Identity. Just before we talk about Petite, Potam, and Petite Nightmare, we need to understand how we create detections in Microsoft Defender for Identity. So if you're familiar with Microsoft Defender for Identity, you know that we have a sensor that is installed on the Active Directory, and it uses 3 types of data sets that you can use for creating an alert. One of the most easiest one to understand is Windows events. It can be Windows events that use us to understand what were the latest logins, schedule tasks that were created. Obviously, this is not unique for us, and and it's pretty simple. The other type of data that we collect with Microsoft Defender for Identity is the network traffic. We parse unencrypted network traffic on the domain controller from a certain. We have a certain parsers for certain calls and network protocols that we care about. We expand it as we do releases on a weekly basis, and we improve that when we find network activities that might be interesting for us. And the third one is we do create some Windows events or Windows activity that are not bound to events, and we use them and we write them and send them to the cloud. All 3 of them are being aggregated together, and then go through our detection platform to raise an alert. Obviously, Microsoft Defender for Identity triggers an alerts that are more, the way I phrase it is a seasonal alerts, whether it's related to a CVE, like in those 2 cases, or a certain tool that was published, and more out-of-the-box techniques that will still be here for years to come, like any sort of a golden ticket or the ability to do enumeration, which is not bound to a certain threat that we've seen in the wild. So you do need to understand that we are doing both, although in these ones, because those are more those are sexier to talk about it, because you really want to know if you are affected by those when they happen, whether it's a CVE or whether it's a tool that wasn't patched yet. Let's start. I explained too much a little bit about the concept, but let's talk about what it actually is. So Petite Potam is besides being a cartoon, a French cartoon, back in the 90s or 80s, it is the name of the attack of vulnerability that was published in August by a French offensive security researcher named Lionel Gilles. And basically, when the ADCS is active on the domain controller and there are certain attributes that are not disabled, you can take over the Windows Active Directory pretty much easily. Basically, you are doing yet another NTLM relay attack that exploit the MS EFS RPC, which is the encrypted file system. And then we're trying to get access to the ADCS, which is the certificate server for web services. So first, let's try and understand the first leg of this attack. Basically, there was a vulnerability in the encryption file service protocol that is usually used to monitor and get access to remotely for files. So basically what you are doing, you are asking a remote server to get an access over a call that is open the encrypted file row and understand it. And it does that without an authentication. And when it does that, basically you can listen in between the call into doing an NTLM relay attack. So if I have an attacker machine that listens between the domain controller and the certificate authority server, you can get a request that was responding to the EFS, and then do an NTLM relay attack. Basically, it takes an advantage of the servers that are not configured with protection for this NTLM relay attack. Microsoft Defender for Identity detects that as soon as it was published, like a day or two in order to release the new releases, but also Microsoft itself released an update that blocked the NTLM relay aspect of it. But obviously, not all of the devices are being patched at the same day that there is new security patch that is being released. And this is why Microsoft Defender for Identity can help you understand if there was a manipulation of this attack. The detection itself is divided into two aspects. One of them is the usage of the EFS protocol over the network, and then you can understand what was the client that was trying to force the DC to authenticate to a different client over shares, over the shares. As we mentioned, this protocol is used to open to encrypt files remotely or locally. So in this example, I can see that there was a user in a certain client that tried to force the domain controller to authenticate with this protocol for those two files that are located in the share of each of those computers on client 1 and client 2. It was the same actor in those two alerts, and this is why it's aggregated to the same alert. Another detection that is currently being rolled out is not just the ability as we described, very, very high level, the first part, which is the EFS, but also the NTLM relay attack, where you take the Kerberos ticket and try to use it. And Microsoft Defender for Identity will be detecting this part as well. So not just the EFS, maybe you will have the ticket from somewhere else and you'd like to authenticate with it. It will be detected as well as part of our next release. As of Print 9, I don't want to say it's a similar style of attack, but you'll find a little bit of similarity between those two. If in the Petite Potam we use the EFS in order to get access to force the DC to connect to a certain client. In this one, we'll use the print spooler. Obviously, the print spooler as a service has many iterations, and it's recommended to be disabled across the devices and obviously the Active Directory. But this particular vulnerability allows you to get access to a vulnerability that you can create printers and drivers and load DLL into a remote device, in our case, Active Directory. And then when you're successfully executing this vulnerability, you can do basically whatever you want, because you can run any code with system privileges on the device itself. The exploitation itself uses two different it can manipulate two different protocols, which is the add printer and the driver, whether it's for MSPAR or RPRN, and basically what you can use those protocols is to load the DLL into the DC, and this DLL can do basically whatever you want. And let's see it live. In the next demo, what I'm going to show you is a client with a share that everyone can read the share on the client. We will ask the DC to pull the DLL that we will be creating in order to allegedly install the new printer or install a new driver for existing printer. And then once executed, just we can do run the malicious code and then bug to the device and get persistency and do whatever you want. I'll stop the presentation and switch to my demo environment. So just a second. So this is my lab environment. As I mentioned, I do have plenty of domain controllers and plenty of clients. In this particular example, I'll start off with the client to demonstrate what Microsoft Defender for Identity, what is the vulnerability and how Microsoft Defender for Identity how can it detect it. So what I prepared beforehand, and it's very easy, just to save some time, I loaded Mimikatz in one window, and then I have a different window, which just a CMD to understand where I am and try to get a little bit of context of what is this device. So I will start with the simple who am I to see that I'm a user in the domain. I'll try to remotely connect to a domain controller with these credentials just to show that I'm a weak user. So basically, I'm taking this $, and then I can see that the access is denied. Just for my sake of checking, I will see who I'll do a reconnaissance for the domain admins in this domain. And then I'll see that there are 3 users, which are obviously administrator, CA user, and this SQL service. None of them is my user or a user that I'm compromising. What I do have here is a share that I created. It's a simple share with certain attributes that can be easily configured. This share is currently empty. But I do have, I created before this call payloads that we're gonna run on we will ask the domain controller to see, to run. Let's start with this one, which is a pretty simple DLL that basically named calc DLL. What it will do, I'll show you in a second, but let's give access to this file in this particular folder. I want to let everyone have a read access to it. And then what I'm going to do, I'm going to go to Mimikatz again. And I'm going to run the print nightmare code against that. So basically, I am taking the remote server, which is the domain controller. I'm taking the DLL from my device, and I'm authenticating with my own user, which is user 1 on this device. And then I can see it was run successfully. Now let's see what happens on the domain controller itself. I'll go to the DC, which I should have already opened. Yes. So what I have here is the domain controller itself. Let me go to full screen. And then I can see sometimes when running that, it depends on the environment, but it might crash the service for the print spooler service. So let's make sure that the service is running correctly. just a second. But before that, let's open the task manager and see that I have a calc exe that is running in system privileges. Obviously, I will not see anything here in this device because it's not a user context, but a system context. And you can think about whatever it can be done while running things remotely. I can get a persistence. I'll go to services, just a second. And let's go to the Win Spooler. And see if the service crashed or not. Why can't I find it? Obviously, it will happen. I saw it. Sorry about that. Print Spooler. I see it's still running. Perfect. Sometimes when you're trying to use it to run the DLLs, it might crash, but in our case, it still worked. I refreshed the printer drivers and I saw that Mimikatz is installed as a new driver. And then if I'll go to the driver list, which is here, I can see that the calc DLL was installed as well. Obviously, you can do a lot with running something in the background when users will not notice, but this is not what we're here for. We can do much more than that. So let's take another DLL and see what we can do with that. And obviously, you can configure the DLL to run basically whatever you want. So I created another payload, which this name is addDA, which is the first letters of my name. I'm going to do the same process where I am giving access to everyone. Apply. Okay. You remember that we checked last time, and we obviously SQL Server, CA user, and administrators. None of them are mine, but running the following command, which is basically loading the second DLL, will result in success. Now, what we can do is we're going to do a net use with the domain that I configured, with the user that I configured in my DLL, which is Microsoft POC with password 1. Command was completed successfully. And now I'll just do the same as I tried to do before, which is getting a dir of the domain controller, and voila, I have the access to the domain controller. And from here, I can go to Windows, and then I can go to the NTDS.
Daniel, some folks in the chat are asking if we can maybe zoom in the CMD window. Maybe use a Windows Zoom.
Oh, wow, that's something that I've never done before, but if it works. I don't know if it's installed. Oh, turn on magnifier. Obviously, this is recorded, so you can.
Yeah, you can see that's real time. Nothing hidden up our sleeves here.
Something bad happened when I used the magnifier. Now I cannot see. Okay. Let's. Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you, Daniel.
Cheers. So I was executing from Mimikatz. Let's open Mimikatz for that. Sorry. Yep, I was executing for Mimikatz the ability to do print nightmare on my remote server with my credentials and running the first time the calc DLL one, and the second time the add DA, and then DA is stands for creating a user for which is my name, and then I can see this user is can log into the NTDS and get the NTDS DIT file, which contains basically all of the information of the Active Directory. And not just that, let's double make sure that if I enumerate all of the domain admins, let's see who is there: administrator, CA user, SQL service, and the Microsoft POC, which I just ran now. And let me turn off magnifier so I can go back to you. If I'll go to the domain controller, I can see that under users in the Active Directory, there should be a newly created user, which we've seen seconds before, but just in the Active Directory. Let me refresh it. Sometimes it's take a little bit time to show and to sync between the domains. I think I've seen something change. If that's the only thing that doesn't work live in the demo, I'm all good. I can come back in a few seconds and show you it's being here as well. Let's see if the print spooler. No, it's still running. It's nice to see. So absolutely being transparent and silent without anyone notice about what we've done. And of course, this is not satisfying enough if we just can run it and not do anything with it. So basically, let's go to the Microsoft Defender for Identity portal. Obviously, it disconnects me. Nice, nice, nice. Oh, this is what happens when you have a keyboard with two different languages. You sometimes type with the other language, and I'm trying to avoid revealing my passwords. The page. Skip for now. Skip for now again. Et voila. Suspected Windows print nightmare, print spooler service exploitation. I can see a user one on client one attempted to execute the remote code on the DC, which is the DLL itself. And if I'll go to the domain admins.
Daniel, sorry, Daniel, we're just seeing your Hyper-V window.
Oh, okay. Let me reshare the screen then.
Thank you.
So I was just logging into the portal to see there is an alert that was created 6 minutes ago when I demonstrated the capability. And then I can see that the user one, which was my user on the client, attempted to execute remote code on the DC1 using a vulnerability in the WinSpooler. And I can actually go to the domain admins and see all of my tests of Microsoft POC was removed, was added, was removed, my preparations for this demo. And then as you can see that the domain admins were queried by user one, and pretty neat to show. It takes up to 5 to 10 minutes for the alert to appear in Microsoft 365 Defender as well. But believe me, it will be here. Let me go back to the presentation so I can show you how it looks like there. So just to recap the demo, we had the client one, user one on client one, open share with 2 DLLs that were pulled by the DC and to have the ability to do whatever I want. And obviously the mitigations that you need to apply the CVE, and you can review the following registry keys to see that you are not vulnerable to the print spooler. And to be fair, just follow the MSRC blog about the print nightmare. We do in Microsoft Defender for Identity provide you the ability not just for detections, but also prevention, basically giving you a report that is consistently updating with all of the domain controllers and show you who is running the service so you can react upon it. It's just one part of our rich offering for security assessments. You should really check that out. Sometimes it is better to prevent alerts before they are even happening. And obviously this is my lab environment, so the print spooler is running in each one of them. We've just seen that the detection in MDI, which is in this case is a different, which is more on a TST client attempted to exploit the vulnerability. Oh, and you can see the execution DLL's details. In this case is Mimispool DLL. If I were to show our case, it was either calc DLL or add DA, which were our executables that we've done. This is how the detection looked like in M365 Defender. And word about that, we are migrating all of our capabilities and features into Microsoft 365 Defender, including the alert page, the investigation. We are introducing new features like response actions and advanced hunting that weren't there before. So basically, we invite you to move to the new Converge portal, which contains information from not just MDI, but the rest of the Microsoft Defender stack, like Endpoint and Office and MCAS and more. And again, this was a very short but hands-on presentation that we wanted to do. We got some feedback around the last detections where we talked about 50 detections that Microsoft Defender for Identity is capable of, and people wanted to know how to go into deep dive of one or two. Next webinar will probably go back to the same 50, and then we can alternate between them, talk about the 50 and then talk about just one. And it was a good opportunity for us to talk about things that we actually worked in the last few months. Obviously, there will be more to come in the future, and this is something that we are happy to say that Microsoft Defender for Identity is releasing versions and new releases on a weekly basis. Just keep an eye on what's new, so you can check this out. Whether it's new detections or capabilities or the response actions that I was just hinting you about, and more and more and more. Ricky, is there any question that is being asked repeatedly in chat?
Managed to handle all the Q&A as and when it was coming in.
Oh, perfect.
It wasn't too technical that I got confused, which is always good. Daniel, you might want to just mention a couple of the detections that we do have in the pipeline at the moment. So maybe what we can expect for the next one of these webinars that we do a couple months down the line. So I'm thinking about the ones that we've got in the pipeline for ADFS and the bronze bit one as well.
Yeah. We are working around the clock for new detections as well. Some of them are related to things that we've seen in the Solori gate and the further expanding our capabilities around ADFS in particular, whether it's reading the DKM key or changing the trusted realm configuration. One golden ticket flavor that I've been asked a lot in the past, and it's currently in a research phase, is the golden ticket with AES. Bronze bit that we've seen many iterations around that. Some attributes in exchange servers that can allow you to get manipulate an Active Directory, and this is just on top of my head, all those 4 or 5. And if you think that we should be looking into more, again, feel free to leave us comments and feedback either on this webinar feedback or Q&A, or reach out to me directly through Twitter or LinkedIn. I'm not very hard to find. And yeah, that's in terms of new detections that I am excited about. With Microsoft 365 Defender round already started, but yet to come. This allows us to do cross-platform or cross-product initiatives, like the ability to trigger investigations for user investigation based on detections that were started from the endpoint or from the office or the mailbox. To be more precise, it allows us to do cross-product advanced hunting and more and more and more. We highly encourage you to try that out and provide us feedback. And as always, we are looking for design partners and customers who would like to talk to us and talk to me directly. So if you feel like it and you have something to show about Microsoft Defender for Identity, don't hesitate to reach out. We encourage that. We have a saying that we really are customer obsessed, and it is not just a saying. I bet there are some people in this call who meet me regularly to talk about Microsoft Defender for Identity or about life. I can talk about life as well. I give pretty shitty advice every now and then. I'm kidding. It was a pleasure to be here. Ricky, do you want to do your closing ceremony?
Close out. Yeah, so just to reiterate what Daniel was saying about the links that we've got up in the slides there, they're all been posted to the chat around where to find us on Tech Community, to where you can find all the previous recordings for these webinars as well. I don't think we've got another one scheduled at the moment, but I'll work on getting that done within the next few weeks. And you'll be able to find all the details on that aka.ms/security webinars link that we have there. So all that's left for me is to say thanks very much for everyone's time and attention. Apologies for that little blip at the start. That was my user error. I'll go and slap myself on the wrist for that. But yeah, tune in next time, and thanks very much, and we'll